All right, I think we're officially live. I'll just do the introduction. Hello, my name is Russell. You might know me if you're watching this YouTube channel because I'm on it a lot. But our guest today is the wonderful Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules. So say hi, and if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, hello Russ, thank you for having me on. My name's Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules, and I do, what do? I do rulebook writing, I create how to play videos, I do playthrough videos, I do game development. I work full-time in the games industry, and gaming has been a hobby of mine since the 80s. So yeah, basically I'm lucky enough in a way to work in my hobby, which is also my passion.
You're a legend in the gaming community for sure, and a lot of people do you know what's funny? I was thinking about this because before we go to the very most important question, I just was going to mention that I remember the first time I actually saw you, and that was during the Gloom Haven video. I remember that.
Right.
So that's just an interesting tidbit for you if you wanted to know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, you know, some of my how to play videos have had like a few hundred views. And then you look at the Gloom Haven one and it's had 750,000 views. And you think, well, it can't all be, you know, me dad pressing F5.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, over the last couple of years, when I've been at events such as, Gen Con or Essen or things like that, I've had people come up to me, not quite in the street, but, you know, at train stations or airports or something like that and go, you're Paul Grogan. I watched your Gloom Haven video. And for most people who bump into me and sort of, you know, say that, they've never seen any of my other videos. They don't realize that I do anything else. They just think, oh yeah, you're the guy that did the Gloom Haven video. It's
I do want to follow up on that, but I kind of standard format point is because we will get back to that, I promise. But standard format point, this is called Tea and a Chit Chat.
It is.
I've got my tea here, and in case anyone was wondering, today I'm drinking something a bit different because I usually go for just English breakfast, Welsh brew. I've mentioned that on the stream, but this is the Russian Earl Grey tea, so I went a bit different today. So what are you drinking over?
Earl Grey?
Yeah, Russian Earl Grey. I'd never heard of it before. It was a gift from my partner's parents.
Right.
The box of teas, and I was like, I'm going to give them a go today. So I'm drinking Earl Grey, and yes, I am drinking it with milk. Don't hate me out there. What tea are you drinking?
So I'm not actually drinking tea because I don't drink tea. So I do have my Tetley's tea cup. But it's water.
Fake tea.
So yeah, I drink a lot of water, but I don't drink tea or coffee.
So why not? What's the story behind that?
Well, I used to.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the short story, because you're not my therapist. The short story is I used to drink too much of it. So back in the 90s, I used to drink too much. I was drinking way too much coffee. I was doing like Pro Plus tablets and everything else. My lifestyle was really not good, and I was getting ill a lot. I was getting colds a lot. I was always run down. I'd be falling asleep, you know, at work. And in 97, it was either 97 or 98, I made a decision and I went, I tell you what, I'm going to stop drinking coffee. I'm going to stop drinking tea. And instead of for lunch, I'm having a bag of crisps and a chocolate bar, I'm going to start eating bananas and apples and things like that. So I quit. And I was clean for a long time. Yeah, it was probably about, I started again in 2017. So yeah, 20 years I was clean.
Wow. And did you feel any negative impacts from that? I mean, because you get the headaches, right? I'm sure.
The first 3 months
oh my God.
was not good. It was the usual. It was headaches. I mean, at the end of the day, caffeine is an addictive stimulant. Your body gets addicted to it. And then when it doesn't have it, it has withdrawal symptoms, and that's how it is. But yeah, I started again in 2017, July 2017, and then I spent 18 months trying to give up. And I'm happy to say that as of January this year, I'm clean again.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's now been, I know it's only been 3 months, but after 3 weeks of migraines, headaches, and feeling rough, I haven't had a coffee in about 3 months. So
fantastic. Well, congratulations on being clean again. Hopefully that will. I know that's a bit. Well, some people just commenting, "What is too much coffee?" And I would say probably like when you're having so much that you stop drinking and then that happens to you. That's too much, basically. So to go back, because I did find that interesting. Now, you mentioned Gloom Haven, and obviously that's that is your biggest video, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Easily by
Okay.
a large margin.
Okay.
In
So
terms of number of views. Yeah.
do you feel like that? I mean, I'm guessing you feeling that that's a good thing, right? That you had a big hit on your hands,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's a good thing. I thought so. Some of the other games that I've covered have been also fairly big, but they haven't had the same impact as Gloom Haven. It's always very difficult to tell. It's like advertising. Not that I know much about advertising, but when you pay X million pounds or thousands to have billboard advertising up or on TV or anything else, how do you know? How do you track that? I mean, I guess marketeers can look at the stats and go, oh, we've had a percentage increase in sales. I don't generally do that. Has things changed since I did the Gloomhaven video? Have I been getting more regular views? Have I been getting more? No, I haven't. And that's the odd thing. So in some ways, it's been really successful in terms of lots of views. It's brought attention to the channel. But the average views on my other videos has actually gone down since doing the Gloomhaven video. I don't think they're related. I think it's just, obviously, the board game market. It's saturated. There's a lot of media out there. But I mean, I didn't go into the Gloomhaven video thinking, this is it.
Yeah.
This is what's going to put me on the map. I'm now going to get, 10, 15,000 views on all of my videos like some other people do that get, that do videos like me. It hasn't had that effect. But,
It's an interesting one, though, because obviously that would be the expectation. I mean, I certainly thought that you would have benefited from that. But you're right, there are a lot more people doing content now, and it's so hard to sort of grab a piece of that market. Even if that market is growing, there's a lot more people trying to grab that. In terms of the Gloomhaven thing, because obviously it is one of my favorite games, I'll be honest. Did you, how early in the process were you involved in that?
Yeah, well, there's one other thing I just want to touch on about the views is I kind of have a policy that I don't like to turn YouTube advertising on.
Yeah.
When it was a commissioned video, that for me doesn't feel right. The fact that somebody's commissioned me to make a video and I turn advertising on.
Yeah, I can see that.
But oh boy, do I wish I'd turned advertising on that Gloomhaven video, because do you not think that it's oh my god, what I was say? I forgot what I was going to say. I think that you're right, but do you know? Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Do you know how much money you would have made from that? I don't really want to mention it.
Okay,
so.
fair enough. Because I know that there's a certain point after that YouTube videos sort of give you money, and then after that I have no idea. I don't know how much you can get from it. But...
No, I did the wrong thing of looking into it and saw how much it would be and thought, oh, that would have been nice. Okay. But anyway, right. What was your other question?
I don't know. I'm kind of this is the whole point of this. Is it's not necessarily
it's
a structured.
Informal.
Yeah, it's like
you asked a question and I went back.
Yes. Goodness me, that's bad, isn't it? Oh, how early on in the process were you involved?
That was it. Yeah. So Isaac approached me, and we had a chat about things.
You knew him before?
I don't think I did. I did because I got Forge War.
Okay.
Yes. So Isaac's first game, Forge War, which I'm going to say didn't do well because compared to Gloomhaven,
of course,
it didn't do well. But it did okay, and I really enjoyed the game. The game it wasn't that popular because it was a bit long and a bit repetitive for what it is. But I liked it. I really liked it. I agree it was a bit long, but I really liked it. And that's how I first knew about Isaac. And this is all thanks to Rado. Okay. I watched Rado's run through of Forge War and just watched it for 10 minutes and went, yep, that's a game which I think is the kind of game I'm going to like. I backed it and then obviously got to know Isaac through that. I didn't start calling him up because of it, but we got to know each other a little bit through that. And then he spoke to me about Gloomhaven. And when I first saw Gloomhaven, I was like, oh, okay. I've been a D&D player for 25 years. I grew up playing fantasy role-playing games. So the fact that it's kind of that, and it's a dungeon crawl, but with Euro-based mechanisms, I was like, okay, well, this sounds really good, but the scope of this sounds massive.
Yeah.
And I don't, I was nervous at the time because you see this a lot on the Kickstarter. You see people launching these big fantasy epic games and a lot of them just fizzle and don't do well. And I thought, oh yeah, I definitely want in on this one. This is definitely something that I'm very keen on. Now, at the time, I was doing my usual, 70 hours a week, no holidays. So I was in on the emails about the development process, but I wasn't really able to contribute to them. So I didn't get involved in the game development at all until very, very near the end of the process, where I'd played, like Isaac sent me a few files and I played through a prototype in order to be able to learn it enough to be able to do the video for the for the game.
Yeah.
And there was one bit that we weren't keen on, and I persuaded Isaac to add a variant rule into the game. So he did that. So there's a variant rule in the game that all came from just a couple of plays that I had.
So you did have an impact in it. So you do.
Yeah, but okay. in a tiny way. But I wasn't involved in any of the rest of the game development at all.
It is still something though, and it's a fantastic game. Are you going to be involved with the rules video for Frosthaven?
Isaac's not asked me, so I'm assuming no, because if I was going to be, he would have probably asked. The question is, does it need one? Now, the core rules of Frosthaven are the same, and there's these extra bits where you can craft items and you can go back to town. Is it worth doing a video just on those bits?
Yes, I was going to say maybe, but then I think if the core game is the same, maybe, then like you would be able to grasp that from watching just your Gloom Haven video. But but I always feel like with a new video, people are going to be put off. I mean, just from a viewer's perspective, if I was to like, oh, I've just got Frosthaven, how do you play it? And then someone's just done a video that's like just the extra bits, I'd be like, oh, I kind of want to watch a whole thing. Yeah. So anyway, I was just curious about that. Anyway.
Yeah, no plans, but I need to drop him an email about something else because I'm going to be involved in Frosthaven in a different way, but I can't announce it yet because it hasn't been announced.
Okay, cool. Very exciting.
I need to drop him an email about that, and I'll mention this at the time because I've got space in my schedule for the end of this year or the start of next year, which is I think when the game's probably going to be coming out. So yeah, I could do something.
I mean, I'm so envious and exhausted at hearing you say that. Like I'm one of those people that's been furloughed thanks to this coronavirus situation. So the fact is my schedule right now is just open, but you are just a busy man and you're still managing to keep yourself busy throughout this whole thing, which is phenomenal.
The current situation is weird because obviously there are people out there who are financially impacted on this in some way, and that's obviously bad. And there are some people who might end up losing their jobs about it. But I was talking to Vicky last week and I was like, so hang on a minute. If I understand furloughing, you are off work, you are not going to work, you are not allowed to work, but you're going to get paid 80% of your salary.
Yes.
And I'm like, there's me here working 12 hours a day. And I'm like, hang on a minute, can I be furloughed, please? So,
yes, it is. I mean, it's one of those situations which is not obviously great for certain people, but there is definitely something to be said. Like the reason I'm doing this is because I have the free time in my schedule now, and I would never have been able to do that. And especially because obviously most other people are somewhat impacted in terms of the amount of work they're doing. Obviously, it was still very fortunate that we were able to grab like an hour of your time for you to do this, because obviously hearing you keeping yourself busy like that.
Too busy.
Yeah, but I do feel a bit guilty about thinking, yes, I am sitting here, I'm not actually doing any work right now, but I am trying to keep myself occupied. But it's not my fault.
If you give us a minute, I'll make you feel less guilty. I'm just sending you a rule book. If you can edit this for me later this week, that'll really help me out.
Oh, you want to put your whole brand on the line there, Paul. So moving on. So I have to ask, because gaming rules.
Yes.
It's obvious what that kind is referring to, but like I have to know, where did that name come from exactly?
Well, when I started doing this, oh gosh, when was it now? 7 years ago. I basically posted on my Facebook page at the time and said, guys, friends, I'm thinking of doing something different. Now, I had a full-time IT job at the time. The intention was that I would do this as a side project because I love teaching people how to play games, and I felt that certain games it would be beneficial if there was videos on how to play. I wasn't aware of other people doing it at the time, so it's not that I copied somebody else, even though people accused me of that. I actually came up with the idea myself, and I posted on Facebook and I said, so I need a name for the channel. And yeah, this was going back 7 years, and some of the ones I got were Play with Paul or thing, and it's just and there was lots and lots of suggestions, And then I had a suggestion in from an old friend of mine who, unfortunately, I've lost pretty much most of my contact with. I don't really see him anymore or speak to him, but he used to be part of my D&D group when I was in Hertfordshire. A friend called Mark, and he said, "Gaming rules!" ! Because it works. Because on many levels. First of all, gaming rules.
It's a statement.
It's a statement, but also you are going to be teaching people the rules of a game on video. And this was even before I did the rulebook work. This was before gaming rules started out as just the tutorial videos. And all of a sudden, it's the perfect name. It fits. So, it's kept. And it's funny because at UK Games Expo a few years ago, I was wearing one of my big gaming rules t-shirts that has gaming rules printed on it in big letters. And people were walking past and going, "Yeah, it does." And I'm like, "Yeah, you have no idea what this is." But the fact that it works as a statement as well. So, yeah. And the other thing that's funny about the company name, because it is a limited company in the UK, the exclamation mark is part of the company name. If you look me up on Company's House, that exclamation mark is there. So when people don't use it, I correct them.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, it must cause havoc with their search, because I know that these kind of websites are all based off really old architecture or whatever. So it must cause havoc with their search filters. But that's cool. That's a cool little note. I didn't know that. So that's fascinating. Yeah,
that's how it started. So the exclamation mark, when people miss it out, I do like to point out it's actually part of the official company name.
Well, hopefully people watching this will remember that. But it's funny because Ben's just written to think we've missed out on the Play with Paul, especially with an exclamation mark timeline.
Yes.
Think how different it could have been.
There is actually a Play with Paul channel, but that's a different channel.
Okay, fine. That's not for this audience.
Not for this audience.
No. Okay.
Send you the link later.
What's the earliest game you remember playing? And I'm talking like, it can be from your childhood, but like the earliest board game you remember playing.
I remember a few. And this is going back to when I was a kid. I'm an only child, and I remember as a kid playing around with them at home in my bedroom. And the few that I can remember are Frustration, Mousetrap. I spent hours and hours and hours just building it and setting it up.
Yeah, nobody likes playing that, just building it and then
building it up. Obviously, things like Buckaroo, the kids' games and things like that. Mm-hmm. The one that I remember, and Andy Grant, if he's still in the chat, will know this well. It's a game called Spy Ring.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's very, very old. I mean, I played it in the 70s. That's how old it is. But it's a game which influenced me because I'm a typical kid. I like me fantasy. I like me sci-fi. I like me spy stuff. I like me James Bond stuff, things like that. And Spy Ring was a game where you move these little pieces around. Have a look at it on Board Game Geek.
Yeah, I'll be looking it up as soon as.
And you slot these little aerials into their heads to show that they're starting to speak to each other on walkie-talkies, kind of thing. Oh, cool. So I remember playing Spy Ring a lot when I was a kid. And when I say playing it, it's not really playing it with other people. It's me playing it at home on my own kind of thing.
So you would like doing basically an early variant of solo gaming?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
They're the early games that I remember into the, non-hobby games.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing I'm interested in. I remember one of the earliest games I actually physically remember playing, like visually remember playing, was a game called, I don't think I know it, but it was like Finders Keepers or something like that. And it was just the most basic roll and move. You had like a house with like 4 rooms, and then you had like these tokens which had things on one side and were blank on the other side, and you placed them all blank, and it was all just about going around and finding something. Okay. And we picked it up from like a car boot sale long time ago, and I think Andy's just confirmed that they remember it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just I just remember picking it up from a car boot sale and playing it, and it just being like really fascinated by it. But even it was probably a terrible game. But I wish I still had that, because that's like an iconic sort of memory of mine for playing games. But yeah.
One thing that I've always worried about is I have these memories as a kid of playing games and enjoying them. Mm-hmm. Is that what led me to where I am now? Do I enjoy playing games now because I enjoyed playing them as a kid? Or does every kid enjoy playing Mousetrap at home and things like that? And then most people sort of grow out of it. I'm not sure.
That is an interesting thought exercise, because I think that what that shows to me is that you have the kind of personality or brain that kind of is attracted to or enjoys or gets sort of like stimulated by playing games. So I think that was going to happen regardless of whether you whether you played with games as a kid, it just maybe it's cemented, or maybe it kind of give you the option, board games are a thing I enjoy. So maybe when you thought about board games later on in your teens or an adult, whenever it was that you sort of properly got into games, you're like, oh yeah, I love playing board games.
Yeah.
For me, like, I played them as a kid, but my family weren't that bothered about playing them with me, so I ended up having to I kind of lost the playing of board games for a long part of my teens. It was only when I actually went to university and with other people who actually really enjoyed playing games.
Yeah.
And then was when I really got into them. And I remember Catan was the first proper board game that I ever played. Right. But yeah, anyway, who knows? It could have. You just don't know, do you? Really?
No, because most of the people we speak to are all gamers, so they're going to have. What we need to do is we need to find people who don't like board games, and ask them, "Did you enjoy playing board games as a kid?"
Yeah.
And then find out why they didn't progress. But to be fair, a lot of the people who I've met who aren't gamers over the last 4 or 5 years or whatever, as soon as you actually get them to sit down and play one of the modern board games, they go, "Oh wow, that was really good."
Oh yeah.
And it's just the fact that they don't know, or they think the modern gaming hobby is something different from what it actually is.
Oh, totally. And I can totally sympathize with that. I see that all the time. And, they worked at the board game cafe, and the number of time people will come in and play a game, and I'd be convincing them, subtly, or not forcing them to play it, but kind of convincing them to try something new, and kind of bringing it over and explaining it to them. And they kind of feel like you kind of see their eyes open, like, what? This is board games? And,
I can choose where to move to, and not just, wow.
You don't have to just pull a block out of other blocks and put it on the top. That's an experience, but board games are so much more. And so it's kind of nice to kind of introduce that to people. But yeah, it's interesting to think about that. I wonder if liking board games as a kid is indicative of having that kind of personality. That's what my take on that would be, but who knows? I've got no proof. I'm just speculating. So I wanted to ask, because there was something that I remember you are a big kind of advocate for in board games, because obviously you do rule books, and we'll talk a bit more about rule books in a second. But something that strikes me as really cool about you is that you are really an advocate for using gender neutral language in rule books. You've talked about it. You're very open with your kind of likes and dislikes and kind of your issues and stuff online, which I think is also very good, because we had another guest on, John Perkisou, who kind of openly talked about their sort of issues with dealing with the pressures of creating content, etc. But one thing I really like the fact that you're very pushing for this, and you've talked about it a lot. So does that stem from a specific experience with somebody or is that just something you believe is right?
It's something that I believe is right. And the thing is, what's interesting is a couple of months ago, somebody found the Nippon rulebook by What's Your Game, which I was the editor for. And it's not gender neutral. Okay. Now, this is going back 4 or 5 years ago. So I was just getting started. And What's Your Game had what the style that they used to use, because they have changed now, is that they would put a box on the front cover of the rulebook to say, throughout this rulebook, for ease of reading, we're going to use the male pronouns, but, now. Yeah. I look back at that rulebook and I feel bad about it, because there's no way I would do that now. No way whatsoever. And any publisher that does that, I frown upon them for doing that. So it's not something that the gender neutrality in rulebooks is something that I adapted to. If I'd have thought about it, of course it would have been there beforehand. But going back 5, 6, 7 years or whatever, I was in the category of, well, this isn't bothering me, therefore it isn't a problem. And suddenly I became aware that when I actually sat down and thought about it and went, well, hang on a minute, this isn't a problem for me. I don't get upset when I read His in the Room. Well, I do, but I do for different reasons. It's because I know it affects some people. And you're right. Every time I mention this, and I mention it online, not every day, but occasionally I will mention it. And thankfully, 90% of people on social media back me up and say, yeah, go for it, Paul. You're pushing for this. This is really good. I do get quite a bit of pushback from a number of people, either through YouTube comments or through direct messages or whatever, from people who say, I'm going to unsubscribe from you if you keep going on about this. You're wrong. Rulebook should be this, that, and the other, and it isn't a problem. Why are you bothering about it? And it's like, The frustrating thing is these people don't seem to, understand that there is a group of people who this does bother. Therefore, we should do what we can. And it's not a case of, oh, you can't please all the people all of the time. Making your rulebooks gender neutral means that they're not going to offend anybody.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to get offended because your rulebook is gender neutral. It's like, but if you don't make it gender neutral, it is offending some people. So it's like, it's
kind of that circular logic where it's like, it's not a problem, so why are you changing it? You just said it's not a problem, so why are you worried about it? So it's a really frustrating problem, but change is sorry if you heard the background, by the way, that's my doorbell going, but yeah, basically there's never been change is never easy,
No.
And I'm glad that people like you are pushing for it, because it is, as Paul's just said, gender politics in general have changed massively over the last 5 years, and I agree. I think it has been kind of a key issue in the last 5 years, but I'm with you, Paul. I think there's no reason not to have gender neutral language in rulebooks. It doesn't impact anybody. In fact, it only helps.
There are some people who don't like the use of the word they as singular, even though it's perfectly allowed. And it's grammatically correct. People will argue that it isn't, but there's other ways of doing it. I had one publisher who I worked with last year, and it was a really difficult situation, and I can't go into too many details other than to say it was quite a big name publisher, and they were using me for the first time, and I'd already spent about a week working on this rulebook for a fairly big game, and then the subject of gender neutrality came up, and they didn't want it, and they wanted to keep it male. And I have a company policy that I cannot have my name or edit a rulebook or work on it if it isn't gender neutral. And I was like, oh. And here was me involved in an email conversation with a very, very big, well-known designer. And I was like, well, what do we do here? I've already worked a week on this rulebook. My personal company standards, which, to be fair, I put in place, say that I can't work on this rulebook anymore if you're going to make me, and it was like, And in the end, we had to come with a compromise. The end result, it is gender neutral, but it isn't using the word they as singular. And that's totally possible. You just say, the player draws a card from that player's deck. Okay. That player then discards a card to that player's discard pile. It's actually
mind-boggling. If they were willing to change it anyway, why not just do?
They were in the category that they as a singular is wrong, and they did not want they as a singular. And I had to, obviously, they're the client, they're the people paying me. So that it was just a really uncomfortable situation that I was in. Now, whenever I'm doing any rule books with anybody, I try to remember to say that up front and say, by the way, this rule book's going to be gender neutral. If you don't want it gender neutral, I'm not going to work on it. And, thankfully, it's not been a problem.
Yeah.
The European audience is an interesting one, because I've learned a lot about European languages through this. And the reason why you see a lot of rule books from German publishers and French publishers and everything else that are either male-oriented or female-oriented, which I think is just as bad, is because for them, every noun has a gender.
Yeah.
So they are so used to it that it isn't a problem in their language whatsoever. And that's absolutely fine if it isn't a problem in their language. But of course, they get translators, and the translators put the gender into it. And I'm like, look, if your French and German rule books are gendered, that's absolutely fine, because it isn't a problem for them.
Yeah.
It's the English rule books, and you just need to tweak it, and it's such an easy job to do.
I'm glad that it was. Well, I was going to ask you, but you kind of answered it. You kind of established that as a very important factor in working with you up front, and I think that's probably the safest ways, and you don't have to waste time working with people who aren't willing to. I mean, my gut instinct would say that people will eventually kind of accept it in future. I mean, it like you said, it's not a massive problem to use gender neutral language, so hopefully that will be the norm going forward. I should just, by the way, at this point say, if anybody has, because we're going to be doing the sort of your questions, the people out there watching, so I've got a few down here, so if you do want to ask any questions, please use the chat. We could ask them to Paul in a few moments. But yeah, we'll carry on. We'll push through. We've still got a couple more questions I'm actually really curious about. One question of you, your partner, does she play games?
So Vicky's in the other room, and she'll probably hear me talking about her.
Okay.
it's not fair to say that she doesn't play games.
Okay.
But she's not a gamer.
Okay.
And what you were saying earlier on, and this actually sparked something in my mind about saying that I've got the kind of brain that enjoys the stimulus of playing games. Okay, so here's the situation. It's been a terrible week at work. I've worked 80 hours. I'm absolutely let's go back to when I had a full-time IT job, right? Yeah. So I've done 80 hours, majorly stressed. 3 of my team are playing up. It's really, really bad. I will come home on a Friday night and I will sit down and I will play a 3-hour super heavy Euro game.
Yeah.
Because that's what I like. That decision points, that interaction with friends, we're all enjoying the same thing. Absolutely fine. Vicky that's like the worst idea in the world for her. If she's had a really, really stressful day, it's in front of the TV with a jigsaw and or something like that. And obviously I've spoken to her about it a number of times, and she doesn't want, after using her brain so intensely all day long or all week long, to then have to use it playing a game. It's like, well, no, that's crazy. She wants to disconnect. Yeah. Whereas for me, I want that connection because yes, it is absolutely mentally exhausting, but I enjoy the process so much. So it's not a hobby of hers. It's not something that she would choose to do. But we've played quite a lot of games together over the last few years because games have changed.
Yeah, they have indeed.
Escape room games. She loves escape room games, right?
Nice.
So we do all of the exits, we do all of the unlocks, any puzzle games. We both grew up playing point and click computer games.
Oh, lovely. I myself, I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah, we're a big fan of them. So any kind of board game that plays out like a kind of puzzly mystery adventure or something like that. So obviously there's the exit games, there's the unlock games, there's the Chronicles of Crime, anything like that where we're working together. She doesn't like competitive games.
Okay.
So games where we can play cooperatively, and cooperative games for me weren't a thing 10 years ago. I didn't see the point of cooperative games at all. And now I absolutely love cooperative games.
That's funny. I've mentioned this before in a podcast or something before, but it just baffles my mind that that cooperative is a new genre, that one of the newest genres in board games, and to think that nobody had done that before is just wild. But you've worked on a few of the unlock games, right?
Yeah.
Does that not
it's interesting?
Yeah, because I was like, does that not? You can still play them, or is your
involvement
in them?
Here's the thing. When Space Cowboys approached me initially to start doing editing work for them on the Unlock series and the Sherlock Holmes series and things like this, they said, we will just send you all of the text in an Excel file and we want you to edit it. And I actually said, no, I don't want to do that because we enjoy playing these games together. Yeah. I will miss out on the experience of playing the game. Oh, time stories as well. Yeah. So she plays time stories. So the agreement that I have with Space Cowboys is that they will work on it. They will develop the game. They will get it done in English. Yeah. So they will actually create the PDFs of all the cards and everything else. So it's all done. Then they'll send it to me. I print it all off. We sit here, we play through it, and we fix any errors that we find and everything like that. I'm getting 90% of the same experience.
Yeah.
So obviously, if I come across typos, that's not going to affect our enjoyment of playing it. If we come across game-breaking text problems that we're really stuck, that's obviously going to affect my enjoyment. And if we come across other problems where it just doesn't work properly because, a lot of the unlocks integrate the app.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Now, when I get sent the prototype, that's not working. So what they have to do is they have to send me another file and say, Paul, when you go to location 17 and you would do this, this is what will happen.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, right. So there's a few bits that I miss out, but generally speaking, it's okay.
You still feel like you're enjoying the experience.
Yeah.
That's quite cool.
Yeah. And I've normally got one of them. I normally try to tie it in so that one of them is available at the time we're doing the testing. So that we can basically send in messages and say we're stuck on this one, and we'll be like, you need to do that. So we try and do that when we can.
Fair play, that's cool. I mean, I'm slightly jealous because I do love these. I played most of the exit games, but I've only played a few unlocks. But I felt like whereas exit has kind of remained the same in terms of what it's doing, I feel like unlock is started less good but has become really more inventive
Yeah.
with what they do, in my
Did you
opinion.
play the box where the first one was the 80s arcade game, Insert Coin?
No, I haven't played that one.
Oh.
Yeah? You think I should play that one?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
That whole box uses what's it called? Enhanced reality? Augmented reality.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it really well. So that wasn't
Okay.
there in the first few boxes of Unlock,
I
but
didn't even
it
know
was
that
there
was
in that
there.
one.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Actually, just a bit on that. How do you feel about you? I mean, you're going to have an answer, which I expect based on this conversation. But how do you feel about the use or the integration of technology into board gaming?
Absolutely fine. In fact,
Yeah.
I had a go at somebody today on a Facebook group. I say I had a go at somebody. I just told them they were wrong. Which is the same. It was the discussion going on about the Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle Earth, and from Fantasy Flight Games, which needs an app. It absolutely needs the app to play along with. And somebody said if there's any kind of app together with a board game, it's not a board game. And I basically said you're wrong in a few extra words.
Yes.
I think it's fine. I have no problem with it whatsoever. I'm surprised we don't have more of it, because when app integration started to become a thing, I was a little worried, like everybody else, that it's going to take over. But having played the Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle Earth game, and very recently the Imperial Assault game, things like that, and the Unlock series, I think that's where Unlock, what you said about the difference between Unlock and Exit is right. I love the Exit games, but they are all puzzles, turn the tile, and everything else. Whereas Unlock is starting to explore, you can do cool things like in one of them you phone somebody up and you actually listen to something. And you're like, oh, what's that? And there's other things that happen. So the app does allow you to
be more creative.
Be more creative.
Yeah. That's not to say, by the way, because I do love the Exit games, and I think they have done really clever, creative things with that. But it's not really adapted the formula too much in the whole time it's been around. I mean, there's been some cool things, by the way. Anyway. I'm just curious, because obviously, I remember a couple of years ago. I think it was actually around the time when XCOM, the board game, came out. I felt like there were a lot of people worried about that, and I can see the reasons why they would be fearful of it, because as you said, it feels like it would take over, but it really didn't end up being that at all. I think it's mainly
the thing is with XCOM is
I didn't like that game, by the way, at all.
You say a few years ago. I'm looking it up. 2012, I think. No, that can't be right.
I mean, I don't know. It's definitely like a long time ago, but
the thing with XCOM, here we go, 2015. The thing with XCOM is there was no rule book in the game. And
really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was the problem. The rules were all in the app.
They were prompts on the app, weren't they?
Yeah. Whereas the other games I'm mentioning, there's a rule book.
Yeah.
There's a rule book just like other board games, but the app does all of the admin. It does all of the generation of the scenario. And that for me was quite a big difference.
I feel like that's a good point, but I feel like the issue, what I can see is where, like, my favorite integration of apps into board games is where they kind of take a lot of the fiddliness out of board games. So, for example, in a game called Alchemists, there is a way that you can play the game without the app, but that person then has to just sit there and have like a really unfun job.
Yeah.
So it's almost like an admin role within the board game. And so you mentioned Star Wars Imperial Assault as well. That's essentially taking a really boring job away from a player and making it more slick and quick and a more fun experience, and they're kind of giving you a lot of information. So I see there's definite merits to playing to integrating it with, and there's even with the Unlock as well. That's a very clever way of doing it. Like having lots of different ways that you can use, your phone to do something that makes the experience better as a whole. And
I mean, I was talking to Vicky last night actually about Imperial Assault. So 12 years ago, when I left Hertfordshire, or 13 years ago, I left Hertfordshire, moved to Taunton, put an advert in the local shop to look for local players. Found a few local players. Still friends with them now. Well, two of them anyway. One of them, I don't know what happened to him. And we started playing Descent.
Okay.
We actually started playing general board games, and then we played a couple of games of Descent, and then we got the Road to Legend campaign, and we played a lot of it. And the original Descent, first edition, with the Road to Legend, well, Descent, it's a one versus many game. And after playing it for about 18 months or so, I realised that I don't like one versus many games. For a start, I was the one.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the way that everybody was ganging up on me and sometimes sent me out of the room while they could discuss tactics and then brought me back in. I didn't feel that. But then when we turned the tables and somebody else was the one, I also didn't like that either. And then Imperial Assault came out, and then Descent 2nd Edition came out, and then they released the new Road to Legend app for Descent, which means all of a sudden these games where I enjoyed the game and I enjoyed the mechanisms, but I wasn't able to play it because I don't like one versus many games. You're right. Suddenly it's taken the role of that other player, and it's now become a fully cooperative game. So
kind of circling back around, but somebody's just mentioned there's an app for Cryptid and Gloom Haven that both make the game better. They take the fiddly bits out, and I agree. Like Gloom Haven, I do use the app because I'm just so frustrated having to keep track of stuff, and you always forget something in that game. Frustrating.
Yeah, we didn't use the app. So lots of people were talking about the Gloom Haven Helper app, and lots of people were using it. And it was about a year after that I finally decided to load it up and try it. And I was like, oh my God, why didn't I try this a year ago? Because tracking the monster hit points and everything else was just incredible.
It's
just,
so much
just
better.
While we're talking about apps, I've got, if you want a funny story, Alchemists. So whenever you release an app to the App Store in Apple or to Google, Android and everything else, you have to go through a validation process. So Alchemist came out in 2000 and whatever, right? The year Alchemist came out, and I do a lot of work with CGE. 2 weeks before Essen, I think it was about 2 weeks before Essen, CGE submitted the app to the App Store.
Yeah.
And then it got rejected. They looked at it for about 3 or 4 days, and then they rejected it. And they said the reason they rejected it is because this app does nothing on its own. They need the app to be able to basically do something on its own and not just be, right, this is the reason it got rejected. So all of a sudden, CGE had to develop some kind of little mini game within the actual app for Alchemists so that it was actually useful. Right. And then, of course, you've got to get the approval process through. Now, the Wednesday night before Essen Spiel is due to start on the Thursday, where the game is due to be released and people are going to be buying it, I am in the hotel room on the phone to Apple to try and get them to approve it.
Oh my God.
I'll never forget it. I was sat there in the corridor on my phone because, of course, working with CG, this is before CG got their American people.
Yeah.
I was the native English speaker who did work with CG, so they went, Paul, you're the best person. Ring them up and try to explain what's going on. Try to explain that we're releasing a board game out of the biggest board game event in the world. And we got it approved. And then Thursday morning, Alchemist go on sale. People downloaded the app and people could play it. And it was like,
oh my gosh. Stressful? Stressful? It sounds like a bit of a stressful situation.
It was more stressful for CGE, but it was just, working in the games industry, you end up doing some interesting jobs sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you never thought that. I bet that's the last thing you expected you'd be doing when you got involved in board games, being on the phone to Apple. Just the night before a big board game convention.
Yeah.
We actually should talk briefly about conventions, because obviously
What
you're at
conventions?
a lot of them. In fact, you actually ended up creating your own convention.
I did.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to briefly talk about the general conventions, you demo. You're like the king demo. You demo a lot of stuff, and it's mainly for CGE, right? Have you demoed for anyone else?
Yeah. So I mean, it all started with CGE, and I was demoing for CGE at Essen Spiel before gaming rules existed. So CGE was a company who I was a big fan of, and I got to know them, and I started doing demo work for them at Essen, and they'd give me a couple of games as sort of payment. And I was like, this is great, because Vlaja's amazing. I'm demoing games that I love. I love teaching games. So, that was enjoyable. Once gaming rules was formed, the demoing became actually part of the professional aspect of my work. At the big conventions, so certainly the American ones, I'm 100% CGE.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that I can afford all of the money to go across to these conventions myself. So they pay for me to go there, and I'm not just part of the demo team with CGE. I'm the one who kind of put in place the structure and the processes for the way that CGE demo games. So yeah, been doing that a while. At Essen, I've done demos for CGE. I've done demos for Cephalofair, so Isaac, doing demos of Gloom Haven and things like that. But mainly CGE, with a dabble in other things. At the UK conventions, I don't demo for one company. So I don't, apart from UK Games Expo, which obviously I'm there with as CGE. But the other smaller conventions around the UK, so your Bacons, your Manacons, your Handycons, your Aircons, Dragon Meat. Oh no, Dragon Meat was CGE.
Okay.
So Aircon, Handycon, Manacon, Bacon. I'm there as gaming rules. So instead of it being a CGE demo table, it's a gaming rules demo table. And I do demos for a number of my clients, which can vary. It's CGE, it's Lucky Duck Games, it's What's Your Game, it's Eagle Griffin Games, it's Space Cowboys. Sometimes it depends which clients have games coming out.
Andy's going, by the way, he says bye.
Oh, thanks Andy for joining in. So yeah, I generally do demos of, whichever companies want me to do demos for them at the time.
One quick question about that, because before we move on to sort of audience questions, is do you have like a favorite convention?
Oh.
And like the metrics and the reasons behind that is just totally up to you. And you just don't even have to explain it if you don't want to, but just have like...
They are all my favourite. And this sounds like a cop-out.
You can't say that. You have to pick a favourite child, Paul.
Well, it's difficult. I can't even compare Essen and Gen Con because they feel different. In some respects, Essen is better than Gen Con, but in other respects, Gen Con is better than Essen. And they're the two big ones that I go to. When you look at the UK, I think HandyCon is fantastic. HandyCon is a brilliant convention. I have gone on record and said that is my favourite UK convention. Okay. Because I believe that what Paul has done forming HandyCon, he's just done a fantastic job. Now, that is no slight on Mark with Aircon. Aircon is brilliantly organised, right? Aircon is just great. UK Games Expo is great, but Games Expo is one step higher. Well, it's more than one step higher. But Manacon, there's only 250 people that go to Manacon. It's been running for 35 years. I've said in the past, Manacon is my favourite convention because I love it. It's cheap and cheerful. We stay in university accommodation. The food is student food, which everybody else has a problem with and I don't. Yeah. And I just get to play games for 4 days. And that's it.
So maybe that's it. Maybe it's the fact that you actually get a bit of a breather and you get to actually sit down and play loads.
I say play games. I'm still demoing at them.
Okay. But, what's the last convention you went to where you didn't have to demo something?
About 7 years ago.
Okay. Are you planning on doing that anytime soon?
No.
No? Okay. Fair enough.
So what I've done is I've actually cut back in the last 6 months or so. I've cut back. Because going back 2 years, I would be at these conventions and I would have 2, sometimes 3 demo tables running at the same time, and I would be running between them. We won't go into the reasons why I run myself ragged. At the last HandyCon, I said to people, and I said to my clients, I am planning to only have 1 demo table, and I am only going to be demoing 50% of the time. Okay. And that's what I did. And it was actually quite difficult for me to mentally take a step back, and I had a brilliant time, and that's where I'm going to go from now on. So I basically demoed 1 game of Sanctum every day. I demoed some other stuff. I basically did about 3 or 4 hours of demoing a day, and then the rest of the day was games I wanted to play. Posted the schedule to my patron supporters. They all jumped in and basically played lots of games, and it was really good to play games and not have the pressure of running lots of games at once.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's probably a wise idea because it can't be good for you to do so much like demoing constantly, and especially. But yeah, I'm glad that you're actually finally getting a chance to go to these cons and experience it a little bit more the way that it was meant to be experienced. All right. Well, I guess we should move on to some questions. We've only got 10 minutes left. It's flown by. So question by let's just read it out because I almost. Missed it. How are you finding playing games on Tabletop Simulator?
So I first tried Tabletop Simulator when it came out. I don't know when it came out, but I don't even think I was living in the southwest of England when it first came out. I think we'll have to Google it and find out. Can somebody Google it in the chat?
By the way, if someone could Google it and find out.
When did Tabletop Simulator first start? Because I fiddled around with it, and I had an experience of it where it was painful.
Oh gosh, yeah. I've heard
Moving
that
things
about it.
around was just slow and cumbersome, and I had to keep moving the camera, and I had to pick up items. Right. I've been using Tabletop Simulator now a lot in the last week and a half, and I'm absolutely loving it.
Oh wow.
I think the software's come a long way,
Yeah.
and there's so many things that you can do now in the software that actually, sometimes you have to go over there, scroll the camera, pick up an object, move it over here. Sometimes you have to do that. But there are other ways that you can do it. So we were playing Crown of Amara last night, and the Crown of Amara mod has got bags of resources, and they're unlimited. So you can keep taking resources out infinitely. Now, what that means is that I can take the resources out when I get them, and when I spend the resource, I literally just press the delete key. I move my mouse over it, press the delete key.
Okay.
I don't have to pick it up and put it back in the supply. So it actually, once you use Tabletop Simulator, it depends on the quality of the mod. If you get a good mod where it does the setup automated and it allows you to, put cards in hidden locations, there's so many clever things you can do with it now.
It's what we were saying earlier on about it takes some of the fiddly bits away from
some of
the
the fiddly bits
technology. That's what it should be for. It should be for removing the annoying bits of board games. If not all the time, whatever. 2015 apparently. That's
2015. Okay, so I was down here.
Thanks for looking it up, by the way.
Yeah, thanks for looking it up. So it's only been around for 5 years. Okay, yeah, my false memories.
I feel like just to briefly say because I have actually not played it, but I have played Tabletopia, and I'm really impressed with the quality of that software in terms of it does do a lot of the thing. It scripts a lot of things. It keeps information hidden. The only thing is that it doesn't seem to have as wide a variety of games on it as I feel like it could, and I guess that's partially down to not having the relationships with the publishers and stuff, but hopefully that will change in the future. Another question, Steve Law, as it's demonstrated behind you actually, he's talking about the things in the background. Basically, have you ever put a lot of thought and really deep thing in the background of one of your videos, but nobody's actually mentioned?
Yes.
And would you like to reveal like an Easter egg? I don't know if you know this, but I'm all about the Easter eggs in board games and stuff in general. So is this technically your version of an Easter egg?
It is, and I do it for a lot of my videos, more specifically the how to play videos. I like to put things in the background, and some of them I want to see if people notice them. And I'm a little disappointed sometimes when the YouTube video's there and nobody comments on it. The last one that I did, which was fairly obvious, is the On Mars video that I did. So the On Mars video is another video that's had a lot of views. Is that on this small shelf here I had a DVD. Okay, it was actually Shaun of the Dead is what the DVD was. Okay. Because I just went over to the DVD collection, picked up a DVD because it didn't matter, put it on the shelf, and it was Shaun of the Dead. My how to play videos are all divided into chapters, and for each chapter of that video, the DVD was a different Mars-themed DVD. So it was Mars Attacks. It started off as The Martian, obviously. Then it was Mars Attacks. Then it was John Carter on Mars. Then it was Mission to Mars. Then it was Life on Mars, the BBC TV series. Now, a lot of people spotted that, but the YouTube comments are actually quite funny because people were saying, did anybody else spot that the DVD's changed? And I've had a lot of positive feedback on that one saying, really cool idea, well done. Because that took me ages. That was a lot of work in Photoshop, overlays through the whole video to do it.
So it wasn't real, so you just overlaid it. Oh, I thought you printed off a sleeve. No.
It was all just Photoshop overlaid.
So it was worth it then. It was worth it.
It was worth it for that one. There's a few other ones that I've done. I had an Oasis DVD in the background of my Brass Lancashire video because Oasis are from Manchester. Gotcha. Nobody spotted that one. I'd have to go back and have a look at them. But I try to put objects in the background that are as thematically tied to the game as I can. And it is nice when people do spot them, but it doesn't always happen.
Oh well. Well, that's the great thing about Easter eggs. Somebody will eventually spot one. I think I think that is the point of it. Well, there we go. Now you know all of the people watching this. You can go back all through his older videos and just basically spot all the Easter eggs, and then you can bump up his view numbers.
Yeah.
So,
please do.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's the real reason, isn't it? No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another quick question. Ben Taylor asked that if you were paid for your work in Jaffa Cakes, what's the lowest? Because you are a big fan of Jaffa Cakes.
I am a big fan of Jaffa Cakes.
Probably obvious to most people watching this. But what was the lowest acceptable offer you'd make for your work in Jaffa Cakes?
Considering rulebooks can be anything from 10 hours work to 150 hours work, it's difficult for me to accept payment in Jaffa Cakes.
But I would assume you'd probably at some point, if you were doing okay and you went in you were doing quite comfortably, might go, well, I'll do a game for like a lifetime supply of Jaffa Cakes.
Oh yeah. I mean, to be honest, if somebody's got like a 2-page rulebook and they say, Paul, the rulebook should be fine, just have a quick read through it and I'll buy you a 10-pack of Jaffa Cakes or something like that, then yeah, I'd probably do that. But I can't really do any full quality professional work for Jaffa Cakes. Now, Ben did have a serious question as well as the silly one.
Yes, he did. He said, what are the best and worst genres of board games to work on?
Is that what he said?
He did, he asked several, but I just picked some. So the one question he asked you before is a question you asked. So just in case you don't know, Paul does run his own Patreon. And he gets a monthly Q&A. So a lot of the questions that I've asked today, I've tried not to. I don't know if they were successful, but I tried to ask him stuff. Maybe he doesn't get to asked a lot in this Q&As. So somebody did ask a question that he answered in a lot of his Q&A. So I didn't specifically.
I don't mind asking it again. Yeah. I think the question, because I saw the question on Twitter from Ben. So thank you, Ben, for the question. And it's timely that you asked the question because of something that happened to me a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And it was about the theme of the game. Does the theme of the game affect my approach to working on the rulebook? Do I get more excited about working on a rulebook because it's a, Gloom Haven 2, it's a fantasy cooperative game, or if it's a pick up and deliver game, or if it's worker placement or anything like that? And the answer is no. And I'm happy with that because that's the professional answer.
Yeah.
The professional answer is it doesn't matter what your game is. It doesn't matter whether this is going to be a failed Kickstarter or a $10 million Kickstarter. I am going to work on this rulebook the same way that I work on everything else. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what the theme is. It doesn't matter what the setting is. It doesn't matter what the mechanisms are. I'm going to work on it in the same way. So that is my answer. Cool. And the reason why I say it's timely is I had an uncomfortable discussion with a publisher 3 weeks ago about a rulebook that I was working on, where, without going into too much detail, there were difficult discussions that were happening. And one of the emails I got from them was, I need to know your opinion on the game, Paul, because if you don't like the game, I think that's going to affect your ability to work on the rulebook. Mm-hmm. Well, that was a professional insult to me, and they didn't mean it that way.
Yeah,
But that's how I took it. I'm like, no. Your game could be the worst game possible, in my personal opinion as a gamer, but that would not affect in any way.
It'll still have the best rulebook ever.
Well, I'll try. I'll certainly work at it as good as everything else. Now, personal enjoyment, yes. If I get sent the next Alexander Pfister game, mm-hmm. I am going to get more of a personal kick and satisfaction out of working on it than I would if it was, random designer from wherever. And that's no slight on the random designer. Mm-hmm. As I said, the professional quality will be the same, but the personal feeling is I'm there going, I'm working on Alexander Pfister rulebook. He's one of my favorite designers.
It's like when you posted about the Stefan Fell game that you worked on, you'll be working on recently. You seem really excited about that. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. You got to work on a game that you're really excited about. Two more quick questions, and you have to keep them really trim, the answers.
Okay.
One, Chris Stanton asks, what's your favorite fonts, personal preference in terms of font and size? And I think that's a cool question to ask, to be honest, because it is, being that you work with a lot of text and font.
Yeah. I don't know whether I've got a favourite one. I mean, there is the one that I have chosen for the Gaming Rules brand, mm-hmm. which is Franklin Gothic. But that's because that's the first one I use and I've stuck with it. I actually don't like the font now. I kind of want to change it, but I'm kind of stuck with it.
Coming in the future, maybe?
Well, yeah, it's just, it's there. and it's certainly good for titles. So I use that one a lot. I wouldn't have said that's my favourite one. I don't know whether I have a favourite one, to be honest.
You don't have to. You
No.
might not have even genuinely thought about it, but I just thought maybe if you did, because I've got a friend who's like all over UX. He does a lot of UX design.
Okay.
And he has his personal favorite font. So I was just curious. I think that was a good question, though. I'm sorry.
There is one that I am going to mention if I can find it very quickly, because it's really good, and it's the designer of Adrenaline and Sanctum that sent this to me when I was designing my own game. He said, "Oh, Paul, I've got the exact font that you should use for the titles for it," and I can't remember what it is.
In that case, why Ross from More Games Pleased, Ross Connells asked, "What's your most played game ever?"
Oh, it's a good question. I'd have to probably look on BGG. I mean, Gloom Haven I've played. My total logged plays for Gloom Haven are probably about 50.
Okay.
If we were to class most of the other games in my collection, I haven't played any of them more than 50 times. But I have played Puerto Rico 300 times, and I have played Kalis 300 times. Online implementations. Actually physically playing a real physical board game,
I think
probably Gloom Haven.
I think digital ones count there.
Digital ones, in which case, when I took a career break in 2003, I played Puerto Rico about 300 times using Brett Spielvelt, which predates all of the other ones that we use at the moment. But
it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but I've never played Puerto Rico.
It's not embarrassing at all.
No, I really want to play it, though. I've heard so many people talk about it.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Unfortunately, that is the end of the video. So we couldn't get to ask the last question that Paul asked. But you know what? Luckily, Paul Grogan does have a Patreon. He runs... I'm going to get you to advertise it in a second. But if you want to ask him more questions, the good news is you can. You just sign up to his Patreon, watch his monthly Q&A videos. Please tell us what if people want to continue watching you and stuff, in case we've got some stragglers on who have no idea. How do they find you?
So the YouTube channel is Gaming Rules Videos is the YouTube channel. And whilst every support on the Patreon is important, the live Q&As are public. So anybody can tune in, anybody can ask me questions to do that. What I would suggest, though, is I have a guild on Board Game Geek. It's guild number 2258. Usually a few days before I'm doing the live Q&A, I will post to the guild and say, give me your questions there. So if you can't tune in live, then I normally post on the guild and ask for questions in advance. If you've got any questions for me, I'm usually happy to answer. Well, I will generally answer as many as I can. Quite often I get questions in which stump me, because they're really good questions, and I can't I can't make a decision.
Save them up for the next one or something, but
that's what I try to do, and then I forget.
Fantastic. Well, anyway, we'll have to wrap that up there, but thanks so much. Thanks so much for being on as a guest. It's been a real good session, I feel like.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. Just in case, we do have another one scheduled on this coming Friday at 6 p.m, and that's with Bez, the designer behind Yogi and the L deck and Kitty Cataclysm. So if you have any questions, please ask, because we'll put them to her on Friday. Hopefully you'll be able to tune in. And thank you very much. You know where we are. We can see the Instagram and Twitter handles on the bottom there, but obviously we're on YouTube. You're watching us right now, so there's no need to tell you where that is. But thanks so much. We'll see you all in the next video, hopefully. Take care.
Cheers all. Thanks.
Bye. And now to find how to stop this. There we go. Done.